Bioware is in shambles, and I'm not sure it can be saved without a major restructure. Another excellent piece of reporting done by Jason Schreier. Maybe he's paying attention that his outlet was just sold at a massive discount, and he wants to remind his new owners, the private equity group, that he is worth his weight. And I do say, when Jason does the games journalism, he does the games journalism really well. It's everything else surrounding it that, of course, always brings criticism to his game. Now, Dragon Age 4 built, rebuilt, canceled, rebranded. We saw an absolute mess of timeline going on with this game, and I'm going to break down a little bit of what was going on with it, why I believe it's time for Bioware to go the way of the dodo bird. It's over. I think the problems at Bioware are systemic, and I'm not sure that they can be fixed as long as they're owned by EA. I think this is so deep. The malfunction, the poor management, the mismanagement. And by the way, none of this is the people on the ground's fault. The coders that are in there trying to grind away. Listen, if you work at Bioware, I feel for you. We've seen more than I ever cared to know about the internal workings of your company over the past couple weeks. And wow, the fact that you've stuck it out this long is a testament to your resolve and your love of the gaming community. So I want to just take a moment to just remind people that this is not dumping on the actual devs at Bioware. I appreciate their work, their passion, their dedication, and I know that my viewers do too. Like this video if you appreciate games, passion, game developers' passion for games. Ding! Thank you. So anyway, what did we find out yesterday? Well, the history of Dragon Age is a complicated one, but I want to start at the end, okay, and then go back to the beginning. I'm a big Hollywood producer here. Essentially, think of the new Dragon Age 4 game as something that was amazing and now is going to be built on Anthem's code base and is essentially Anthem with dragons. I'm not kidding you. This mess is absolutely mind-blowing. The upper management at Bioware, look, they need to go. They need to go. And I think EA, after seeing, everything get exposed last time around in the Anthem and with everything that's gone wrong with Anthem, and now with everything that's going wrong with Dragon Age, this is not a developer problem. They are capable of making a great game. But a lot of this stemmed from Dragon Age Inquisition winning Game of the Year, essentially creating a monster. You get a game that was produced in a very, very short period of time, like 2 years or something like that, under immense crunch. The game wins Game of the Year. It absolutely wasn't the Game of the Year that year, but nonetheless, it wins Game of the Year. So I think you basically end up positively reinforcing very bad behavior. And of course, people are just going to continue to try to do things that way. Originally, Dragon Age 4 had amazing vision. It had a project named Joplin. And I want to read just an excerpt of what Dragon Age 4 could have been before we are going to get what sounds like an absolute trash heap that nobody asked for and nobody wants. Another former Bioware developer who worked on Joplin said it was some of the best work experiences they've ever had. We were working towards something very cool, a hugely reactive game, smaller in scope than Dragon Age Inquisition, but much larger in player choice, followers, reactivity and depth, he said. I'm sad that game will never get made. You'd play as a group of spies in Tevinter Imperium, a wizard-ruled country in the north end of Dragon Age's main continent, Thedius. The goal was to focus as much as possible on player choice and consequence, which, that gets me wet. With smaller areas and fewer fetch quests than Dragon Age Inquisition, which was, the fetch quests are brutal. It's like you design a really cool thing. And so developers like, how can I get people to go look at this thing? So we give you a fetch quest. Rather than finding organically ways to incentivize people to explore the world, you give them fetch quests and force them to discover it. This is counterproductive. In other words, they wanted Joplin to be the opposite of the hinterlands, right? There was an emphasis on repeat play, one developer said, noting that they wanted the areas to make the areas that changed over time and missions that branched in interesting ways based on your decisions, to the point where you could even get non-standard game overs if you followed certain paths. It's like when you let developers make an amazing game, you get amazingness. When you are owned by EA, mismanaged by, I can only imagine, EA fluffers, this is what you get. You get Anthem. You get Dragon Age 4, which sounds awful now. A large chunk of Joplin world would center on heists. The developers talked about building systematic narrative mechanics, allowing player to perform actions like persuading and extorting guards without the writers having to handcraft every scene. It was all very ambitious, very early. It would have no doubt changed drastically once Joplin entered production, but members of the team said they were thrilled about the possibilities. And then, basically, there is a hiccup where Mass Effect Andromeda is in dire straits, and they need to put all hands on deck to make that happen. And again, you move developers off Joplin, then you get Mass Effect Andromeda done, and you put them back on the project. Then, by 2017, it had not been a secret about its desire to make all of its major games into, quote, gaming as a service, best defined as games that can be played and monetized for months and years after the release. Traditional Dragon Age games did not fit that category. Inquisition had multiplayer mode, but was something that, something like that really going to bring long-term revenue EA wanted from expansive productions like Dragon Age 4? And the answer is no. Then things go bad with Anthem. So they then again move developers over to Anthem to put out all the fires. And in the meantime, at that point, Joplin gets canceled. The project then reboots, if I'm understanding the timeline, under a project name called Morrison, which, get this, is a live service and built on Anthem's code base. By the latter half of 2017, Anthem was in real trouble, and there was concern that it might never be finished unless the studio did something drastic. In October, not long after veteran Mass Effect director Casey Hudson returned to the studio, they moved its staff, including executive producer Mark Dara, onto Anthem. A tiny team stuck around to work on a brand new Dragon Age 4 codenamed Morrison that we built on Anthem's tools and code base. It is a game being made right now. Unlike Joplin, the new version of the Dragon Age is planned with a live service component built for long-term gameplay and revenue. One promise from management, according to a developer, was that in EA's balance sheet, they'd be starting from scratch and not burdened with the 2 years of money that Joplin had already spent. Question was, how many of those ideas and prototypes would they use? And that's just so heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to hear that. And you have the developer themselves basically saying, I'm sad that game is never going to get made. If you can imagine, how much money is enough money? To get Project Joplin, codename Joplin, would I have paid $100 instead of $60? Maybe. If it was everything they promised it would be and more. Why are they so focused on live service? Dragon Age 4 described as, quote, Anthem with dragons, reportedly as heavy live service focus. Dragon Age 4 currently in development at Bioware Austin is actually the second version of the game. An earlier take, codenamed Joplin, headed up the longtime Dragon Age writer Mike Laidlaw, was canceled in 2017 in order to shift sources to Anthem resources. The earlier version of the Dragon Age 4 was designed to be smaller than your typical Bioware game, but with greater focus on player choice. That's what I really love. A bit leery of Dragon Age 4's Anthem-inspired direction. Well, don't get too worried just yet, as the game is still very early in development and could change. Here's how one anonymous Bioware employee put it. They have a lot of unanswered questions, plus I know Dragon Age 4 is going to change 5 times in the next 2 years. Well, if they're using Anthem's codebase, I don't want anything to do with it. I really don't. It was about magical heist until the 2017 reboot. And here's an interesting fact. Here's something to look into, okay? We saw a trailer for Dragon Age 4 at the Game Awards. What was that? Last fall. We now know that we've seen a trailer for a game that not only doesn't exist, but nobody even really knows what it is. And when you look at the interaction, the relationship that EA has with its development studios, the way they develop games is very clear, all right? Start with a profit goal and then build a game around it. And that's what they do to gamers, right? And we end up getting a game that has a goal of making money instead of a game that's goal is being innovative and being awesome. The idea that it's going to be built on Anthem's tools and code base and is planned with a live service component is extraordinarily concerning to read. Still not all doom and gloom. Kotaku report paints a hopeful picture of Morrison's early development with talk of a main story designed for a single player, with multiplayer existing to keep people engaged so they would actually stick with the game post-launch content, but it's all still very vague. You know, there are people that this will appeal to. I like to play through, the way I like to play these games is I play the story mode and then the game goes on the shelf. I have really no interest in playing Red Dead Redemption 2 online, even though I love that game, but I know lots of people do. The problem is when you are a company that works with EA or any other major publisher, these are companies that see games not as an art form, not as something that is supposed to entertain, titillate, engage their audience. They are vehicles that they fill with money and drive to their bank. Many Dragon Age fans are doubtless very much looking forward to the next installment in the franchise, but maybe their enthusiasm will be dampened given the latest from the gaming grapevine, which seems to indicate EA has switched courses to model the RPG more along the lines of Anthem. Why? When it comes from Kotaku to interview concerning Bioware's slow progress in Dragon Age 4, it has, after all, been 4.5 years since Inquisition. DA4 still languishes in early development. I mean, can we think of a game, any product, really, that is designed around making money that is also really good? iPhones, maybe? Android phones? I mean, that's about all I can see. I mean, reading lots of feedback regarding Dragon Age, and I think you'll be relieved to see what the team is working on, story and character focused. Too early to talk details, but when we talk about live, it just means designing a game for continued storytelling after the main story. Well, that could be a silver lining, but let me tell you what I really think. I think it's time for Bioware to be closed down by EA and to be reborn as something else. Or it is time for Bioware to do what Bungie did and figure out a way to get out from underneath the claws of EA. They are clearly not the team that works well with EA. They are clearly not a team that works with that corporate pressure on them very well. They are also a team that clearly does not stand up for their player base, and that maybe, it would appear, are more concerned with pleasing the boss than pleasing the customer, which is not necessarily a knock on them because, I mean, you have to get paid, you've got bills to pay, but man alive. The idea that it would even be built on the absolute mess that is Anthem. The fact that you'd be talking about live services. Now, maybe Casey's right. You know, maybe. But I think it'd be easy to agree at this point that literally anything EA touches turns out suboptimal. I'm not saying they can't make a good game. I'm not saying that there aren't people that really love Anthem. There are people that are going to love the Star Wars game that gets announced this weekend, regardless of how overly monetized it is. Maybe with years of updates and fixes, that the Anthem's code base can be good. But I really have zero interest in playing Anthem with dragons. I have zero interest in buying anything from a creative company that seems literally incompatible with a company that is a money company. Money ruins creativity. It ruins innovation in a lot of cases, especially in this case. And I just don't think that BioWare and EA should stay together anymore. I think it's time to break up. I think it's time to divorce. What do you think? Do you think BioWare can be saved? Do you think that everything's going to be fine? Or do you think that they need to move on like Bungie? Or do you think, the problems are so deep at BioWare that it just needs to be shut down? I'll be interested to read all of your comments in the comment section down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to leave a like on it before you leave, and we'll talk to you again real soon.